Hey everybody, welcome to Ecstatic Self. My name is Kay, and I've been receiving some questions from some of you if I could talk a little bit about how I became a Tantric Yogi and how I kind of fell into this path. I think it's a really important question to kind of consider, like, why did I become the person that I am? And like so many things in life, I think a large part of it comes from things that maybe happened before we were born. So from a lot of spiritual traditions perspectives, there are multiple lifetimes that we live before we get into this current lifetime. And the patterns and the actions that we took in those lifetimes can often transfer over to this one. Now, it may not be literal. If you were, a hairdresser in your last lifetime, you won't necessarily be a hairdresser and an esthetician, or however you say that, in this lifetime. But tendencies, patterns, lessons that you need to learn, abilities that you cultivated can transfer over. So for me, like when I was a young kid, I used to spontaneously sit in lotus pose, do headstands all over the house. I used to go into deep states of meditation. I remember being in first grade and looking up at the wall and seeing the counting numbers that we were supposed to be going through and becoming very aware of my breathing and just having like this orgasmic state like set upon me just from observing my breath. And that would happen from time to time. Like I would become aware of something inside. I would just spontaneously do these yogic practices and enter states of deep awareness, deep internal connection. So I definitely came into this lifetime with a strong knowledge and a strong history of experience in these areas. I had a mentor once tell me that I'd spent several lifetimes as a monk or a sadhu recently. So that said, I don't know how much that I chose this path so much as that this was the path I was called to be on, and my whole life orchestrated to bring me here. So I was raised Methodist, grew up in a Christian church, and was fairly happy there. Like I really liked the teachings of Jesus, and I liked spiritual community, but I had this really nagging feeling that there was something more going on with spirituality than I was experiencing in the faith I was brought up. And I wanted deeper. I knew that there was an experience of God, an experience of creation, an experience of ecstasy that was possible, but that the church wasn't giving me. So around my freshman or sophomore year of college, I started looking at different spiritual traditions, and nothing was really resonating with me. I went and visited the Baha'i Temple up in Evanston, Illinois. I read the literature and websites of like Mormon traditions and Jewish traditions and Buddhist traditions, and nothing felt quite right to me. And then simultaneously at that time, I was getting interested in practicing yoga. And for me, that was just kind of like physical practice. Like I was really drawn to the postures and like the state it brought me into. And then I got back from summer break. I had been interning in Los Angeles for the summer, and I got back to campus at Northwestern and started wanting to take in-person yoga classes. And there was classes I found where they would do an hour and a half of yoga and then an hour of meditation. And I really loved it. It really was like a sense of coming home for me. And the person who was teaching those classes practiced in a Tantric Yogi tradition. So I ended up studying with their school for a while and actually living in their ashram for a few years. And then since then have explored numerous other traditions. Now, like I've shared in other videos, just because somebody says that, oh, I'm a Shaivite, or I'm a Tantric Yogi, or I do this kind of practice, or I do that kind of practice, or I'm Buddhist, it doesn't necessarily mean that they approach things in the exact same way. So for example, the tradition I originally, I'll say, grew up in, once I started following the yogic path specifically, identified very much as a tantric path, but they very much downplayed anything about sex and sexuality. They treated those things as being much more metaphorical. And then it had only been fairly recently, in the last year or 2 years, that I started to encounter people who were very much on a very robust, also parallel tantric path. Most of them were Vajrayana Buddhists, which I do some practices of, but I don't consider myself a Vajrayana practitioner. And I started to realize, like, oh, all of these things that I had been taught and learned as being metaphor aren't actually metaphor, like they're actually things that you do. And so it kind of like helped me to rediscover my own practice in a new way and rediscover things and how I approach people and how I approach sex and sexuality, because I think that we're doing a huge disservice to the contemporary world by divorcing those things, because we need to bring our full self to the table. We need to bring all of ourselves. And if you're told that, some part of you is bad or sinful or less holy even, you're not going to develop fully as a human being. You're going to develop in ways that are, I'm going to use the word a little bit warped, right? Because you're growing certain areas, but not everything. And if you want to become a renunciate, if you want to become a monk, a sadhu, a swami, great, more power to you. That's a wonderful tradition. Most of us are not going to take those sort of vows. And I think it's really unfair to hold those sort of people in higher esteem and say they are more holy, they are somehow more spiritual because they took those vows. In reality, it is possible for any of us to achieve enlightenment, to achieve our best state, to achieve a true, deep spiritual connection with ourselves in full embodiment, regardless of where you're at in life. So if you're a householder, if you're a student, if you are a monk, those are all beautiful and valid traditions, and no one is better than another. No person is better than another. We are all just on our journey, and we're all heading to slightly different destinations. We're all at slightly different parts of our path. So it's unfair to say one is better, one's more advanced, one is more further along or more mature. Does that make sense? So that's a little bit about me, where I came from. Since I had left that tradition several years ago, like I said, I've studied with different teachers and practitioners. I've got interested in Vajrayana, got introduced and curious about the Bon tradition. I've studied a little bit of mystic Christianity. I've had some really beautiful and wonderful mentors, and studied the books and teachings of some really beautifully evolved souls. I list some of them on my website, so you could check those out if you're curious. But I think one of my biggest teachers has been the one inside. And I think this is important for all of us, because we have external guides and we have internal ones. And our most profound, our most trustworthy, and our most intuitive guide is the one that exists inside our heart. We all have an inner guru, and that's the one that's going to guide us into what we need to go, where we need to go for our development. So I encourage you to trust that inner voice, trust your inner self, and know that you are beautiful and perfect as you are, and you have everything you need for your spiritual evolution. And if there's something you need somebody to teach you, or you need a lesson, or you need some sort of vow or practice or tantric experience or whatever, if you need it, you will get it. If you ask for it, and it's in your best interest, you will get it. So really, there's nothing that's ever being held back from you. There's some practices I'm probably not going to share on this YouTube channel, because there are more things that should be explained one-on-one. But even those, right? Like if that's something you need and or want, you will get it. Anyhow, I hope this was helpful. I hope that revealed a little bit more about me and where I come from. And thanks for watching Ecstatic Self. I'm Kaylin. Namaste.